My sister framed me for stealing mother's jewelry, but 8 years later she begged when I returned rich. I ran away from home at 17 because my sister falsely accused me of a crime, and my parents believed her. Years later, I had a chance encounter with them, only to witness the consequences of their own choices. My name is Arturo. Today, I am 25 years old. But the story that truly matters, the one that defines me, began when I was 17. Growing up in my house was like living in a permanently rigged courtroom. There were two defendants, my sister Isabella, who was 1 year younger than me, and myself. The difference was that she was always the innocent victim, and I was by default the perpetrator. Our parents, Sarah and Eduardo, were the judges, and the verdict was always the same: Isabella, the poor thing. Arturo, why can't you be more understanding? Isabella was not stupid. She was a genius of manipulation. She had discovered by the age of 5 that tears were a weapon, and that the word accident was her impenetrable shield. And my parents, Sarah and Eduardo, swallowed every syllable. I remember when I was 14, I spent 3 months building an incredibly detailed diorama of the solar system for the science fair. It was my masterpiece. The night before the deadline, I found it crushed on the garage floor. The polystyrene planets were shattered, the orbital wires ripped out. Next to it, Isabella was sobbing. "It was an accident," she wailed when my parents rushed in, drawn by my screams. "I just wanted to get a better look and I tripped." "You tripped?" "It's on the other side of the garage, Isabella. You had to cross the whole room to trip over it," I shouted, heartbroken. My father Eduardo's hand connected with my cheek. It was the first time he had ever hit me. "Don't you talk to your sister like that," my mother Sarah roared. She rushed to embrace Isabella. There, my love, it wasn't your fault," she whispered to her. Then she looked at me with a disdain that still burns me. "Arturo, it's just a stupid project. How could you make her cry like that? You should be ashamed." That night, as I frantically glued the remnants of my project back together, knowing my grade was shot, I heard Isabella laughing on the phone with her friend in the next room. Totally, and then Dad hit him. It was epic. That was the pattern. Money disappeared from my mother's wallet, only to magically appear under my mattress after I'd seen Isabella buy new clothes. Her bad grades were excused because she felt pressured by Arturo's brilliance, the time she conveniently forgot to tell me my parents had called to cancel a plan, leaving me stranded at the library or a friend's house for hours. Every single time, I was the bad guy. I was insensitive, jealous, cruel. I stopped trying to defend myself. I became a ghost in my own house. I focused on one thing: getting out. I kept my head down. I achieved the best grades in my class. I secretly worked at a coffee shop 30 minutes away by bus, telling them I was at debate club, and hid every single penny in a shoebox beneath a loose floorboard in my closet. My plan was simple: endure until I turned 18, graduate, and disappear. I had 6 months left. 6 cursed months. The catalyst was, ironically, something that had nothing to do with me. Isabella, at 16, had started dating an older guy, a disaster, with a motorcycle named Damien. My parents, of course, hated him. It was the first time I'd seen Isabella do something they truly disapproved of. One Thursday afternoon, I came home to find chaos. My mother was sobbing on the living room sofa, and my father was pacing in circles, his face red with fury. "What happened?" I asked, my internal alarm sounding. "The jewelry?" my mother sobbed. "Your grandmother's jewelry, the pearl necklace, the diamond earrings, it's all gone from my jewelry box." My father grabbed my arm, his grip was steel. "Where is your sister?" Panic flooded me. "I don't know, I just got here." "Damien," he growled. "That delinquent convinced her to run off and stole your mother's jewels to finance it." 3 hours passed. 3 hours of frantic calls to the police, to Damien's parents, to Isabella's friends. And then the front door opened. There was Isabella, alone, crying hysterically, her makeup smeared. "My love, my girl!" Sarah shrieked, rushing toward her. They embraced in the hallway, and Isabella's words dropped like poison into the silent air. It was Arturo and Damien." I felt the floor drop out from under me. I turned slowly from the kitchen. All 3 of them were staring at me. What did you say?" I managed. "It was Arturo!" she shrieked louder. "He forced me. He said that if I didn't get him the money, he'd tell Damien that I was seeing someone else. Damien would kill me. And then Arturo took the jewels and said he'd sell them. He told me if I said anything, he would leave and tell the police that I planned the whole thing. It was a masterpiece of a lie. Absurd, convoluted, yet perfectly designed. It painted me as the criminal mastermind and her as the victim of everyone. My mother looked at me. My father looked at me, and in their eyes I didn't see doubt. I saw confirmation. They saw what they had always wanted to see. I was the problem. Isabella was the angel corrupted by my malice. "Arturo," my father began, his voice low and shaky. "Open your backpack." "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Open the damn backpack, Arturo. Give us the jewels now. I don't have them. He's lying. Check her purse, check her room, call Damien. Don't bring Damien into this, Isabella shrieked. He has nothing to do with. You threatened me. Enough, my father roared. Sarah, call the police. What? I said, my voice breaking. Call the police, Eduardo repeated, staring at me fixedly. If you don't give us the jewels, we'll let them get them out of you. My mother picked up the phone. Isabella was triumphantly sobbing in her arms. That was the moment, the click, the realization that I didn't have a family. I had jailers and a saboteur. Fine, I said, my voice came out cold, dead. Call them. But first, I'm going to my room to get my phone to call my lawyer. I obviously had no lawyer, but it made them hesitate. Just go to your room. We'll discuss this, my father said, suddenly less sure now that his bluff had been called. I walked up the stairs, not running. I went into my room, closed the door, but didn't lock it. I moved with an efficiency that surprised me. I pulled the shoebox out from under the loose board. There was nearly $5,000 in there, saved penny by penny over 2 years. I stuffed the money into my pockets, put on my thickest jacket, grabbed my backpack, emptied its school contents onto the floor, and packed 3 shirts, 5 pairs of socks, my toothbrush, and my charger. I heard their muffled voices downstairs, arguing, likely deciding what my punishment would be. I went to the window, I opened it. It always squeaked, so I inched it up millimeter by millimeter. I stepped out onto the porch roof, something I had done 1,000 times to escape the noise. I climbed down the garden trellis, my hands scraping against the wood. I landed on the soft grass of the backyard. I didn't look back. I walked around the side of the house, down the street, and kept walking until I was 10 blocks away at the downtown bus stop. I bought a one-way ticket to the farthest city my money could afford, which turned out to be 6 states away. I sat in the back of the Greyhound, adrenaline humming in every nerve. When the bus pulled out of the station and passed the "Welcome to Ferb, population 12,500" sign, I felt no sadness. I felt no fear. I felt relief. I was 17. I was alone, and I had no one in the world, and it was the happiest day of my life. The next 8 years were not a blockbuster movie. They were hell. I arrived in a Midwestern city I didn't know with $4,400 and the clothes on my back. The first month, I lived in a youth shelter, lying about my age, saying I was 18. I got a job washing dishes in a Greek restaurant under the table for cash. The owner, a gruff man named Niku, asked no questions as long as I worked hard. I learned fast. Sleeping at the shelter was dangerous. I saved for 6 weeks and rented the cheapest room I could find, a converted closet in the basement of a shared house that smelled of mildew and despair, but it had a lock. During the day, I went to the public library. It was my sanctuary. I read everything. I used their computers to get my GED, my high school equivalency diploma, online. I forged a guardian signature and tested out within 6 months of arriving. My only contact with anything resembling home was Uncle Mateo. He wasn't truly my uncle. He was my father's second cousin, a man I'd barely heard of, who lived 3 hours from my new city. I had seen him twice in my life, at funerals. But my father once complained that Mateo was a stubborn recluse who preferred talking to engines than people. Sounded perfect. When I legally turned 18, I took a bus to his town. I found his shop, Mateo's Repairs. If it rolls, we fix it. I walked in. The place smelled of grease, metal, and burnt coffee. Mateo was underneath an '80s Ford. "We're closed," he grumbled from under the car. "I'm not here for a repair. I'm here for work," I said. He slid out, looked me up and down. "I'm not hiring." "I didn't ask for a job," I said. "I'm here to work. I'll sweep the floors, take out the trash, clean your tools. You don't have to pay me. I just need a place to sleep where I won't get stabbed for my shoes and maybe a shower once in a while." He studied me for a long, long minute. He saw something in my eyes. Maybe desperation, or maybe determination. "There's a cot in the office. There's a shower in the employee bathroom. You smell like you need it. The fridge has beer and yesterday's bologna sandwiches. The beer is mine. The sandwich is yours. The broom is in the corner. If I hear you complain once, you're out. If you touch my toolbox, I break your hands. Understood?" "Understood." "I'm Mateo. What's your name?" "Arturo." "Good. Arturo, stop talking and start sweeping. You're letting the cold in." I lived in that office for 1 year. I swept. I cleaned. I watched. I learned. Mateo never taught me anything. But if I handed him the wrong wrench, he'd throw it at my head. If I left an oil streak, he'd make me scrub the entire shop floor with a toothbrush. He was the best teacher I ever had. I didn't talk about my family. He didn't ask. One Saturday evening we were closing up. He was drinking a beer. I was finishing cleaning a gearbox. "You're Eduardo's son, aren't you?" he said without looking at me. I tensed. "I am." He nodded. Took a long swig. Eduardo was always a talking idiot. And Sarah, that woman only sees what she wants to see. It was the only conversation we ever had about them. The following Monday, he tossed me a transmission manual. Read Chapter 4. Tomorrow you're rebuilding that thing over there, and if you break it, you pay for it. By the time I was 20, I was the best engine mechanic he had, but Mateo saw something more. You got good hands, kid, he told me one day. But your brain moves faster than your hands. You're wasting your time here. You gave me a home, Mateo, I said. I gave you a job, he corrected. A home is something you build, and you're not going to build it covered in grease. What do you want to do? I hadn't truly thought about it. Surviving had been enough. I like systems, I said, surprising myself. I like how things fit together. The diagnosis, right? Engines are simple systems. People, businesses, those are complicated systems. That night, he used his desktop computer, a relic, and helped me enroll in the local community college. Night classes, business administration, and a little computer science. The next 5 years were a blur. I worked at the shop from 8 to 6, ate a sandwich in the car, went to class from 7 to 10 o'clock, studied until 2 o'clock in the morning, slept 4 hours. Repeat. I moved from community college to the state university. I changed my major to computer science. Something about the code just clicked. It was logical. It was fair. There was no favoritism in an if-then loop. It either worked or it didn't. When I was 23, Mateo sold his shop. The buyer, a large national chain, wanted to keep him as a manager. He laughed in their faces. I'm going fishing, he told me. Bought a cabin in Oregon. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000. I can't accept this, Mateo, I said, my voice shaking. It's not a gift, you idiot. It's your share. You were my partner for the last 3 years and didn't realize it. You reinvested everything into the business. Well, there's your investment. Now go build something. He hugged me, a clumsy pound on the back that almost broke a rib. Left. I used that money to finish my last year of college. I used it as a down payment for a small studio apartment. And I used it to build something. My senior project was a software, a brutally efficient inventory management and diagnostic system for auto repair shops. I called it MAT. I built it based on 8 years of seeing exactly what was wrong with the industry. I graduated with honors. A medium-sized tech startup saw my project. They offered me a job. Then they offered to buy the software. I sold them the licensing rights, but retained the intellectual property, and I secured a position as head of product implementation. I am 25 now. I am not filthy rich. I'm not on the cover of magazines, but I have a downtown condo that is mine. I have a car that starts every morning because I maintain it myself. I have a job that respects me. I have a small savings fund, and I have peace. I haven't spoken to Sarah, Eduardo, or Isabella in 8 years. I have no social media. My phone number has changed a dozen times. To them, I am dead. And I had planned for it to stay that way. The trip back to my old hometown wasn't for nostalgia. It was for work. Our company was closing a deal with a regional transportation logistics chain, and I was the only one who understood both the code and the mechanics of the diesel engines they used. It was a one-day meeting. Get in, sign, get out. The meeting ran long. It was 8 o'clock in the evening when I finished. I was hungry and tired. The client insisted on taking me to the best restaurant in town. It turned out to be an expensive Italian place on Main Street, the type with white tablecloths and $4 sparkling water. I sat alone at a table for two, reviewing my emails. I ordered a steak. The place was full, noisy in an expensive way, and then I heard them. It wasn't a voice. It was an inflection, a specific type of sharp complaint I hadn't heard in 8 years, but which my nervous system instantly recognized. I told you I didn't want extra cheese. Are you deaf? Take it away. It's disgusting. I looked up. At a large table near the center, there was chaos. There was a young woman my age. Her hair dyed a brassy blonde that didn't suit her, cheap clothes stained with sauce, and an expression of poorly contained rage. Next to her in a high chair, a small child, perhaps 3 years old, was methodically throwing pasta onto the floor, screaming. Sitting across from her, looking as though they had aged 30 years in the last 8, were Sarah and Eduardo. My mother looked gray. Her clothes were worn. She had dark circles that makeup couldn't hide. My father had shrunk. The man who had once seemed like an intimidating giant now looked like a tired old man with a vacant stare. And the woman was undoubtedly Isabella. The waiter, a kid who couldn't have been older than 19, looked close to tears. Ma'am, that's the 3rd time I brought you the plate, and it's wrong for the 3rd time. God, you can't get decent service anymore, Isabella barked. Isa, please keep your voice down, my mother whispered, looking around in embarrassment. Don't you tell me what to do, Mom. I'm sick of being treated like trash. You know what? I'm not hungry anymore. This night is a disaster like everything else. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. The child took advantage of the distraction to tip over his juice cup. It was then that my eyes met my father's. He froze. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He blinked. He stared. The confusion on his face was replaced by sheer shock. He elbowed Sarah. "Sarah, look by the window." My mother turned her head. Her mouth fell open. She dropped her napkin. "Arturo," she whispered. It sounded like the ghost of a word. Isabella, annoyed at not being the center of attention, spun around to see what they were looking at. Her gaze passed over me. She didn't recognize me, and then snapped back, her eyes narrowing. The recognition was slower for her, but it landed. I didn't move. I just sat there in my clean-cut business suit, my decent watch, a gift from Mateo, on my wrist, my steak half-eaten. Sarah was the first to move. She stood, almost tripping, and walked toward my table. "Arturo," she said, her voice shaking. "Son, is that you?" "Hello, Sarah," I said. My voice was quiet, even. Using her first name seemed to hit her harder than a shout. By then, Eduardo and Isabella, dragging the crying child, were behind her. They clustered around my small table in the crowded restaurant. "Arturo, my God, Arturo, you're alive," my mother sobbed, reaching out a hand to touch me. I pulled my arm away. "I'm eating," I said bluntly. Where have you been?" Eduardo stammered. We looked for you." "No, you didn't," I said as calmly as if discussing the weather. "Or if you did, you didn't try very hard. I was 6 states away. I was pretty easy to find." "You abandoned us," Isabella hissed suddenly, her voice snapping back to its normal accusatory tone. "You just ran away. You broke Mom's heart. Do you know what we've been through?" I looked at her, truly looked at her. The high school prom queen was gone. This woman was worn around the edges, her looks ruined by chronic anger. "Frankly, Isabella, I don't care," I said. I took a sip of my water. A stunned silence fell over them. This wasn't the script they expected. This wasn't the prodigal son returning repentant. But look at you," Eduardo said, his gaze sweeping over my suit, the leather briefcase on the seat next to me. "You look well. You have money." "I am doing well," I nodded. "And you never called? You never sent a single cent?" Isabella shouted. The child, who was named, I don't know, something like Brayden or Jaden, tugged at her earring. She slapped his hand away. "Stop it, Damien, you're just like your useless father." "Isabella," my mother pleaded. Then she turned to me, her eyes filled with a desperation that was almost palpable. "Arturo, your sister, she's had it so hard." "So it seems," I said, cutting my steak. "That good-for-nothing Damien left her as soon as he knew she was pregnant," Eduardo said, as if this were a shocking tragedy. "She's been living with us ever since. 8 years, Arturo. Do you know what that's like? And she can't hold a job," Sarah continued, her voice rising in pitch. "We got her one at the grocery store, fired within 1 week. She says people are mean to her, and now she has this credit card debt." "And it's your fault," Isabella blurted out, pointing a finger at me. I put down my fork and knife. I leaned back in my chair, wiping my mouth with the napkin. I looked at the 3 of them, and for the first time in 8 years, the knot of rage I carried in my stomach didn't tighten. It just dissolved. "Elaborate," I said. "Yes, if you hadn't left," she said, her mind working fast, inventing the narrative on the fly. "If you had been there, you would have been a big brother. You would have scared Damien off. He would have respected you. You could have talked to me. You left me alone to deal with them." She motioned to our parents. "And you," my mother chimed in, sensing an opportunity. "You left, and it broke us. We lost our way. We were so worried about you, we couldn't be strict with her. We were always waiting for you to come back. Your leaving ruined her." "So," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "let me understand this. I left at 17 to save my own life from a felony accusation that you," I pointed at Isabella, "fabricated." "I did not," she squeaked. "And that you," I pointed at my parents, "instantly believed without a shred of doubt. I left with nothing but money I earned secretly washing dishes because she sabotaged me at every turn. And now 8 years later, all of her life problems, her unplanned pregnancy, her inability to keep a job, her terrible personality are somehow my fault." "Don't put it like that," Sarah whimpered. "We were a family." "No," I interrupted. "We were not a family. It was the 3 of you and me. You were a cult with a 16-year-old leader and I was the heretic. You aren't asking me to come back. You're standing here seeing me in an expensive suit in a restaurant I know you can't afford, and you are looking for a new host for the parasite." "How dare you?" Eduardo roared. "No. How dare you?" I said, my voice not rising but cutting through the restaurant noise. People were beginning to stare. "I spent 8 years rebuilding myself from scratch. I slept in a shelter. I washed dishes until my hands bled. I worked 20 hours a day, every day, to build a life for myself because you taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that I could not rely on anyone but myself." I turned to Isabella. "You are their creation, Isabella. They taught you that tears fix everything. They taught you that responsibility is for little people. They taught you that as long as you pointed at someone else, you never had to look in the mirror. Well, guess what? I'm no longer here to be your scapegoat. The monster you created has finally turned on its creators. I turned back to my parents. She can't hold a job? Of course not. She never had to finish a single task in her life. The science diorama, remember? No, I remember. She was fired because she is lazy and incompetent and you raised her to be that way. She has credit card debt? Obvious. She never understood the value of money because every time she stole it, I was the one punished. Remember the money from your wallet, Sarah? I do. Her boyfriend left her? Why am I shocked? She's a manipulative, narcissistic liar. Who would want to stick around for that? You did, because you were bound by blood. He was smart enough to escape. Isabella slapped me. It was a loud, open-palmed crack that echoed. The restaurant fell completely silent. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. I slowly turned my head back to her. Are you finished? I asked calmly. Tears were streaming down her face. They were tears of pure rage. I hate you, she whispered. The feeling is mutual, I told her. But there is a difference. Your hatred is consuming you. Mine doesn't even exist anymore. You are irrelevant. I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and placed 2 $100 bills on the table. This will cover my stake in the mess your progeny made. I pointed to the child who is now asleep on Eduardo's lap, and probably their meal too. My mother grabbed my sleeve. Arturo, please, you can't do this to us. We're your family. She's your sister. She needs help. You have so much. I removed her hand from me, disgusted. Listen to me closely because this is the last time we will speak. I looked at Sarah, at Eduardo, and finally at Isabella. You are not my family. My family was a man named Mateo who gave me a floor to sweep and treated me with fairness. My family are my colleagues who respect my work, and my friends who know me for who I am, not who they need me to be. You are an accounting error, a bad memory. The reason I have life insurance and a proper will at 25. You, I told Isabella, made your bed. Complaining about the sheets won't change them. Enjoy the life you built through lying. And you too, I told my parents. This is your retirement fund. I gestured at Isabella. This is the result of every excuse you made. Every time you looked the other way, every time you punished me to avoid disciplining her, you raised it, you fed it, you protected it. And now it is yours forever. I put on my coat, picked up my briefcase. Good luck, I said. You're going to need it. I walked toward the door. My mother screamed my name, a broken, pathetic sound. I didn't turn around. I stepped out into the cold night. The fresh air hit my face, stinging the red mark of Isabella's slap. I didn't care. I pulled out my phone and called an Uber to the airport. I had a red-eye flight at 1 o'clock in the morning. As I drove away in the car, I saw my reflection in the window. The man staring back was calm, tired, yes, but whole. I left behind 3 people shouting at each other on the sidewalk next to an expensive restaurant, arguing over who was going to pay the bill. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt balanced. The scales, after so long, had finally leveled. They made their choices. I made mine. The difference is, I could live with mine. I landed in my city, drove to my condo, took a shower, and prepared for work the next day. And for the first time since I was a child, I slept without nightmares. This story is not just one person's experience, but a mirror reflecting a highly common reality in our society. The personal details may differ, but the underlying lesson is a shared answer for many similar situations. In countless families, the language of love is quietly replaced by the language of control, favoritism, and denial. One child becomes the symbol of sacrifice, patience, and silence, while another is protected so fiercely that accountability never has a chance to grow. What begins as protecting the weaker one slowly evolves into a toxic cycle, where truth becomes negotiable, responsibility becomes optional, and the scapegoat becomes the emotional shock absorber for everyone else's failures. In Arturo's story, the family did not collapse in a single moment of cruelty. It eroded over years of small decisions, every excuse that was made for Isabella, every time doubt was ignored, every moment when maintaining the illusion of family harmony mattered more than confronting reality. By the time the final confrontation arrived in that restaurant, the consequences were no longer surprising. They were simply the delayed bill for years of emotional debt. When we step back from the drama, the deeper truth becomes painfully clear. A child who is never taught limits rarely learns resilience. A child who is always blamed eventually learns that leaving may be the only form of survival. Families often tell themselves that endurance equals love, that silence preserves peace, and that confronting wrongdoing somehow destroys the family. But sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes silence is the thing that quietly destroys it first. And here is where I find myself speaking directly to you, not just as a storyteller but as someone reflecting on what stories like this reveal about human nature. It takes enormous courage to say, "This ends with me." To refuse the role of scapegoat is not cruelty. It is the moment a person chooses truth over illusion. Boundaries are often misunderstood as rejection, especially in families that depend on guilt to maintain control. Yet boundaries are not walls built out of hatred. They are lines drawn to protect dignity. Arturo did not destroy his family by leaving. The family had already dismantled itself through denial, long before he walked out the window at 17. What he did was something far rarer. He refused to carry a burden that was never his to begin with. Stories like this force us to confront an uncomfortable question about loyalty, forgiveness, and responsibility. Society often tells us that blood must outweigh everything else, but when love is used as a weapon and guilt replaces respect, the meaning of family becomes far more complicated than tradition likes to admit. So imagine yourself in that quiet moment after the restaurant confrontation, standing where Arturo once stood. If the people who raised you spent years protecting the person who harmed you and only turned to you for help when the consequences finally caught up with them, would choosing distance be betrayal, or the first honest act of self-respect?